Another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Quick Tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. And tonight we are going to be tying up the Egg Sucking Leech. What a great little pattern. I'm sure you have fished these before, and if you haven't, you're missing out. You got to keep a few of these in your box, whether it's high dirty water, during spawning season, whatever it is. These patterns are effective and always good to keep in your box. We're going to get to that here quickly and get to the vise and start tying that. If you're with us tonight and you're tying out of your Thursday Night Live Season 7 kit, it's gonna look something like this. You're gonna wanna pull out your episode 2 pack, and we're gonna be grabbing, you're gonna be very easy to tell which fly out of there we're using. It's the one with all the dubbing. That's what we're gonna get to here shortly. We also wanna thank Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this quick tie tonight. If you're interested in this guide school, you can see the dates below. We're doing one class this year, and it's gonna be May 5th to 10th. If it's something that interests you, just reach out. You can see the website there. You also can give us a call or drop us a message or an email, and we'll get to any of that information too that you might have. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask some questions. We also want you to like and subscribe to this video. If you're here for the first time, drop a comment, drop your name, say what's up, let us know how you found us. If you're a regular here and you're part of the replay squad, drop your comment, you know what to do. We want to know how you're enjoying these videos as we do them. Okay guys, let's get on over to the vise and take a look at this fly. This is the Egg Sucking Leech. We're tying this in a little bit smaller. You could go bigger, you could even go smaller. This is a size 12 long shank hook. So we get a longer shank, but the actual hook gap is a size 12. Okay, so we're gonna get to this right away. So go ahead and open up your kit. You're gonna have a few materials in there. We're also gonna use a few different tools. So I'm gonna be using my dubbing spinner on this fly. Gonna need a pair of scissors, a whip finish, and also a handy dandy brush. I'm real simple. I'm just using my Velcro on the end of a tongue depressor. That's all you're gonna need to get through this fly. Okay, so let's pop this out of the vise. If you're tying out of our kits, go ahead and get that bead in your hook or on your hook, and then your hook into your vise. Try to get that nice and level. Make sure it's good and secure, and it's not gonna go anywhere. The egg sucking part of this is the bright colored bead at the front. That could be pink, that could be orange, it could be red. But this just adds a whole nother level to this fly, having that egg sac at the front, okay? That's why they call this the Egg Sucking Leech. Now I'm gonna go head over to my thread, which is gonna be a UTC 140. I want a little bit more tensile strength on this one, so I'm going a little heavier, and I'm tying in black. Excuse me, let's get this thread started just behind the bead. Remember, I need to wrap back over that tag end. That's how I'm gonna secure my initial thread wraps, and I can come in here and break that off or trim it out. Then we're gonna take our thread all the way back to the hook bend, which is roughly on this hook gonna land you somewhere, if you leave your thread down, right around that, the barb on the hook, okay? Don't worry about having a complete coverage. We're gonna come back over this with a few different materials. But the first thing we're gonna go at in this fly is our marabou. Okay, we got this really pretty brown marabou here, and this pattern could be tied in lots of different variations of colors. Leeches can be a little bit lighter. They also can be darker, like black in color. But we're gonna go with the brown and the reddish colored dubbing tonight. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my dubbing, take my fingers, and I'm gonna slide it down until I line up those tips. And you can see that those tips look a little frail and sparse. Okay, these are the very tips of the marabou. We're actually gonna get rid of these tonight, but we don't wanna reach in there and just cut them off. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here with my scissor, and I'm gonna lay it on the back side, and I'm gonna take my thumb and press against it, and I'm just gonna tear. I'm gonna come away from the camera for a second just so I can do this, and I'll show you what the result looks like. We're trying to just tear those tips away, but cutting them off makes them look very straight in appearance. And you can see here when I bring this back in, I still have a few of those thin ones at the top, so I'm gonna do it again. Just gonna lay them across my scissors, pinch with my thumb, and tear them off. And you're gonna wanna try to tear them so they're semi-even. It's gonna come out a little bit better this time. Doesn't have to be perfect, but something like that. I like that. Now the next thing I like to do, wet my fingers and pull it down the marabou. It gives you a little bit more control. It also stacks the material together, and then I'm able to see my overall length. So on this fly, I personally like my leeches to be a little oversized in the tail department. So I'm gonna go a full length and a half. So if I use the hook shank as my guide, that would be 1, add a half, and I'm gonna bring that back to my tie-in point, okay? Now what I'm gonna do right here is I'm gonna switch hands. I'm gonna bring my opposite hand in to pinch the material, take a nice gathering wrap up and over pinch it down, and then do a few more consecutive right away up the hook shank. And I'm just gonna add quite a few wraps in here, because what's gonna happen is if you pull tight and you haven't secured that well, it's gonna wanna twist around the hook shank, and I want it to stay right up on top. So I'm making sure I can grab both sides still, try to make sure most of it's stacked right up on top. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some open spiral wraps. So you see I grab the marabou with my opposite hand from underneath, just to keep control of it. I'm gonna take it down till just behind the bead, and I'm gonna trim it off so that hopefully it lands right around the edge of the back of the bead. And then with some thread wraps, I'm gonna be able to bind that down. And I have just a little bit of space behind the bead. That's kind of the goal. As we bring dubbing into the mix here, we want it to be have a little bit of space behind that bead. I'm gonna continue back one more time, bring all the way back to my tying point. I'm gonna leave it right there. Now the next part is where we get a little bit of skill base in here. We're gonna be using a dubbing loop tonight to put in our dubbing. There's a few different ways you can do. You've probably seen dubbing noodles where we just spin the thread or spin the dubbing onto the thread and then work it forward. I prefer this method on my leeches. I feel it's a little bit more durable and it holds that dubbing in place. So what I'm gonna do to do that, I'm gonna pull back on my bobbin so it's towards me. I'm gonna take 2 fingers, I'm gonna lay them right on my thread, and I'm gonna take my bobbin up and over and lay it back on my hook shank. So all I've done is a loop. Fingers, loop over top, and I'm gonna let my bobbin come down. Now this loop over here that's in my fingers, how I'm gonna secure that, and it's probably about 3.5, 4 inches in length, this loop. I'm then gonna take my bobbin and I'm gonna toss it over my hand. So what I'm actually doing is putting thread wraps over top of that loop, and then I bind it to the hook shank, okay? Again, that's over top of the thread of the loop twice, and then over the hook itself. That's gonna bind that in place, and now it's not gonna move, okay? And if for some reason your loop is a little bit up away from that marabou where we tied it in, just take some thread wraps back so you get it right at the back again where we want it to start, okay? Now I'm gonna take my dubbing spinner. There's lots of different styles of them. This one's made by Loon, has a hook on it. I'm gonna stick that hook right in there, and I'm just gonna leave it down for a second. It's just gonna hang. Now I'm gonna bring my thread all the way forward, right up behind the bead. I'm gonna throw a half hitch in here, and a half hitch is just a simple overhand knot. So again, I place 2 fingers, I cross it so I get a little loop, I wrap it around the bead, and I cinch it down. That's your half hitch. It's like a save button in your work. And this way I can also get my thread out of my way. I'm gonna set it in my bobbin cradle, which is out of view of the camera, but it's just something that's holding my bobbin so it's nice out of the way, okay? Now I've got my loop I'm still gonna be working with here, okay? So I'm gonna go over to my dubbing, and we gave you an abundance of dubbing. You could probably do about 20 flies with this stuff. We don't use a whole ton of it. And what I wanna do is I wanna start taking that dubbing and kind of breaking it into little pieces, getting it spread out. I probably have a little bit too much there. And I'm essentially just kind of stacking it in my hands. You can see I can get like a line of it started just by stacking and breaking, stacking and breaking. Now it's not a perfect thing. It doesn't need to be, because once I put it in my dubbing spinner and I spin it, it's gonna gather all this material together. So I'm then gonna spread open that loop I created, take that material and just set it inside between the 2 pieces of thread that made that loop. And I'm gonna set it down, okay? So I'm left with something that looks like that. Now, if it's sticking out one side more than the other, we haven't spun it yet, so you're able to kind of get in there and work it around, pull it apart a little bit. And if you feel like you don't have enough dubbing, I suggest having about 2.5 to 3 inch worth of dubbing hanging in here. Then just add a little bit more. You can set this back down. That dubbing's not gonna fall out. I could reach in here, grab another little pinch if I think I need it. I suggest doing more than less, because you can always cut it out and not use it all. So I can stick another little clump in here. Now that's probably too much, but that's okay. I'll show you how we can cut that out if we don't need it. Now all I'm gonna do is just above my dubbing spinner, so I'll try to bring this back to you, there's gonna be a piece of thread, okay, between my hook and where my fingers are. I want you to place your finger there and spin your dubbing spinner. Let it spin, let it spin. You can see all that material starting to gather up. I'm gonna spin it again. I want that to be tight like a rope when it's done. But if you do it too tight, if you can feel that thread is like really getting taut, you want to stop, because your thread could very much break at this point too, and we don't want that to happen. So now I've got this really tight looking rope. That's what I'm going to go over to my Velcro on a stick or a brush, and I'm going to start picking out some of this dubbing. Not being super aggressive with it, just starting to pick till it starts to stand up off that rope that we just created, because we want this to look bushy. We want to have a little bit of length to that dubbing. Some of it's going to come out, and that's totally fine. That's why we kind of put in a generous amount. I'm just working it till I get it to stand up a bit like that. Okay, so it looks nice and fuzzy. Now what I'm going to do is with this dubbing spinner is I'm going to start wrapping it forward like almost like a hackle would be on a fly. Okay, so I'm going to start right at the very back, making sure my first wrap is very close to that marabou at the back, and I'm just going to work it forward. Nice touching wraps as I go. And if you think it looks too tight and it's not looking as buggy as that first one we showed you at the start, don't worry. The brushing at the end is what's going to make this come to life. We're going to take this all the way forward. And as I suspected, I definitely have too much dubbing in here, and that's okay. Because what I can do is once I have full coverage and I get a final wrap right in front of that, or right behind that bead, and I know I have enough in place, all I got to do is bring my thread back, and I can take a thread wrap behind and a thread wrap in front. And you're going to feel that thread slide down behind the bead, and that's what we want here. We want it nice and secured behind that bead. And then I'm simply going to come in here, and if you did use up all your dubbing, then it's even easier. But all I'm going to do is trim that off. And that whole loop that we just created, we just cinched down with our last thread wraps, and now we don't need to worry about it anymore. It's secure. But I'm going to pull everything back away from the bead, and I'm just going to start driving some thread wraps in right behind. Now, I do mean right behind. I don't want you to start taking the thread wraps back over the dubbing. I just want to make a nice, secure base right behind that bead. Okay, once you got a dozen or so good wraps in there, I'm going to come in and whip finish this fly right now, and then we'll work on the brushing. Okay, so whip finish, just going to do my standard whip finish tool, looking something like this. I stab my hook on my thread, I wrap it over the back end of the tool, and I allow that to spin forward. It creates a little number 4, and then I can start my wraps. I'm going to do 2 to 3 turn, whip finish, pull it tight. I would do it one more time. I don't love using resin on this fly simply because it normally messes with the dubbing itself if I use it. So I like to get a couple of really good knots in there, and then I'm not too worried about this fly coming apart on me. And I can come in here and trim out my tag end. Now I'm going to get to my brush again. So if you got any extra dubbing that came out when you did it the first time, just kind of pick it up and out of the way. And now I'm actually going to start to just work some of that dubbing all the way around, and I'm going to actually comb it forward, so it's going to look real bushy here for a sec at the front end. I'm just picking lightly. I'm not going crazy on it. I don't want to lose a bunch of dubbing. I'm just trying to pick it up and stand it up and create a little bit of bulk with it. And then I'm just going to gently start brushing rearward. And this is where the shape is going to start to form. And now imagine that all this dubbing in the water is just going to be moving like crazy. All the little pieces that you've brushed out that are now getting brushed rearward are going to stand out real nice and move with that current. A lot like that marabou does. Has lots of action. Just like so. And hopefully, if you brush that well and you got all your materials in there, it's going to look something like that when you're done. The beautiful egg sucking leech. All right, guys. I hope that you found some success in tying this with me tonight. Hopefully your flies turned out pretty good. If they didn't, just keep trying. You got extra materials in there, enough to tie 4 or 5 of these things. Get a whole bunch done. It's going to help you get better at each of these patterns the more you tie them on each pattern itself. Okay, well, I want to thank you again for joining us. This has been another Quick Tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. And don't forget, keep your hooks sharp, your thread tight, and your patterns precise.